everyone. Good morning to that very early webinar of some of us. I would like to welcome you to the digital supply chain and supply chain digitalization. We are joined today by Capgemini and MuleSoft's presenters. And I just wanted to ensure that everyone's muted. So if you would like to ask any questions, just please put them in the chat box and our presenters will answer at the end of this session, which will take approximately 45 minutes. And there is some time left for the Q&A for that. With no further ado, I would like to welcome Eric, Rikard, Hansa, and if you want to start.
Brilliant, thank you, Anna, for pushing us to the right start here in the morning. Good morning, all. My name is Hans Andersson, and I am part of the Capgemini organization, working as industry principal for the retail customer segment. This morning, we'll share with you a web seminar on the topic of supply chain digitalization. It has a certain flavor of the last mile fulfillment piece. It's certainly infused by the COVID situation. And I think, first of all, even though perhaps in Sweden we start to believe that we're starting to at least see the final lap of this COVID marathon, there are many parts of the world that is still suffering hard, and we keep them close in mind and say there's still a long journey to go. But COVID will be present out through this presentation because it has an impact on where we are and where we are heading and what kind of learnings that we have made this far. During today's presentation, if I'm being provided the opportunity to switch here as well on screens, see if Erik can help me through here. Thank you. There's three of us joining this conference as presentators. It's me, as I'm already introduced. We're going to be joined by Rikard Niedermark from MuleSoft as well. He's one of those strategic account executives with a flavor for the supply chain optimization topic that we're going to keep talking about during this morning, as well as Capgemini's own Erik Rundeland, who's the lead for our Center of Excellence when it comes to APIs and integrations, and with some great customer stories to share with us in the end of the seminar. But I think overall, coming back to the topic of this morning, it's all about understanding where we are in the process of optimizing and embracing the last mile of the supply chain journey that has really reshaped everything that we do right now. I think I've just lost the presentation here, or did I do something strange here, Erik? I hope it's still there. Thank you. I think if we're looking over time and if we are rewinding the clock slightly, we can see that COVID came about for just about a year ago, and the whole market, the whole industry itself, retail, any segment really was in a turmoil situation where we really didn't understand where the future was heading. And this really shows itself also in the confidence index that our friends at Svensk Handel, the industry organization, produces. And we're happy to say that just a few days ago, we had the latest update on the May edition of the Svensk Handel's confidence index, which really talks about the expectations of the future from the industry divided into different industry aspects. And we can see that we've been through the valleys of despair, and we are moving upwards again. Some of them has been crossing into the optimistic side. Some of them are still slightly challenged, but we can see that the trends are pointing at the right direction. The significant reason, I think, is showing this picture to this context is really saying if we are looking at how things have been changing, and especially if we take the examples of groceries, we can see that groceries had a tremendous impact in terms of confidence in the early days of the COVID situation. Where would this turn? How will we continue to service our customers? When customers can't visit our stores in the same extent that they used to, how are we going to continue to service our customers? And I think that looking at this scene, we walked through a set of activities. We worked really, really hard in the early months there in just getting our commerce scenario set up to service these new customers. We saw the magnificent increase in customers coming in through our e-commerce channels instead. Grocery, they made a 5-year leap really in terms of the forecasted development within customers coming into the e-commerce segment. And we really exploded with activities. However, the consequence of e-commerce is, of course, the consequence of fulfillment and getting that fulfillment going. And if we walk through the month of COVID, we can see that the initial confidence went up just to go down again. And it's funny to see that if we apply the numbers from the e-commerce sales, we find ourselves in a situation where we are suddenly being challenged by the consequence, the fulfillment, especially when we're looking at our expectations on actually doing this profitably. Do we have capabilities? Will this be a profitable business for us? Are we just throwing money onto the problem? And we can see that in the early days of 2021, as we move forward, we have now started to believe that this could actually become a profitable business for us. And I think that the only reasonable way to interpret this is really saying we're starting to get our piece together. We're starting to get the volumes needed of customers in through this channel, that we can actually start creating optimizations, that we can get benefits of scales, and that we have started learning something from the last 10 months of turmoil as we've seen in the organizations. Why last mile? Why talking about last mile in this context? Can't we just be happy around here and saying that we are on a good path, we are moving steadily to something better? We've actually used COVID situation as a catalyzer to move us into where we expected ourselves to be in another 5 years of future. Why can't we all be happy about this? I think it's the same reason. It's really the consequence of commerce moving ourselves into the demand for fulfillment optimizations. And if we are looking at study upon study, we can see that there's no longer questions on whether we differentiate ourselves on a product offering nor a price offering. The differentiation right now for commerce customers sits really in the fulfillment piece. The benefits that the customer is trying to achieve in this talks about how can I get myself in control of this supply chain? How can I get information on when things are being delivered, how things are being delivered, what's the cost associated, how can I change things as I have ordered a delivery of an item? Because Nike is Nike, tomatoes is tomatoes, and paracetamol is paracetamol. When we can't differentiate on the offer, the differentiation moves to where it actually becomes the reality for the customer. And the reality for the customer is not the purchasing decision. The reality for the customer is actually getting their hands, getting their mouth onto the item that they have ordered. So we can see that this last mile, how do I get what I was out there to fulfill, has become the top priorities for customers through these new channels. And this is a challenge, of course. I mean, it sounds like this could be an easy way of doing things, but it's really, really challenging for all of us within retail. It's so many pieces of this puzzle that we need to get together. It's not just that we send stuff out to a customer. Do remember that we have a supply chain that's been built through the fire over the years, which is really designed to send pallets of items to our central warehouses. And from our central warehouses, we have been repacking the boxes from the pallets, and we've been putting them in distribution carts, and we sent them off to our stores. In our stores, we've been unpacking the cartons, the pallets, and putting the items on the shelves in masses. And first there's actually the customer coming, but taking one single item, going to the checkout and bring that item home for his purchase. Suddenly we need to deconstruct this whole setup. Those systems, applications, those services that we have created with great robustness and efficiencies now suddenly needs to be taken into pieces. And we need to start being able to puzzle these kind of pieces where they fit the best. And most probably in a very flexible and dynamic way, because the customer request is not setting up a new en masse model. The customer is actually looking for flexibility. I want to control this, I want to compare this, I want to replace this, and I want to do things in this order instead. So I think too large, the challenge that the business looking for, the industry is looking for, is really saying, how do we take all these applications that we have built, all those siloed applications that has really been fine-tuned to what they should do in the early days, actually to be able to give away parts of their services into a new process, a new value chain that actually fits the customer expectations today. And just as a carrot, or perhaps it's meant to be a stick in this conversation. Amazon, we are all aware, has just entered the Swedish market. Amazon, the true giant when it comes to platform retailers. In the latest numbers, equally fresh as the Svensk Handel confidence index I just showed, tells us that Amazon has 58% of all their sales now being done through third-party suppliers. That means that they are not selling through their own warehouses. They are not selling through their own assortment. They are actually just relaying the sale from someone else. 58% of this massive amount of transactions is third-party deliveries. So we're not just competing towards what the customer is actually looking for. We're also competing to giants that has made into an art, just doing the fulfillment piece. That's the core, that's the essence of their being, to drive excellence in fulfillment. Those are the ones that we are being challenged by, not just the customer, but also the competitors out there. So what do we do? And I think looking at the different scenarios that's been around in the Swedish market, and the scenarios that we can see are growing and in early days and expected to bloom in a year or so, there's many different business models, fulfillment models that we are exploring. Anything from how we try to centralize, how to build things in large, in dimensions of scales, how we create new gigantic distribution center, often robotics driven, automated, and we see them as being the hub for distribution to end customers in a fairly large area of our country. We have scenarios where we start to do cross-stocking with third-party suppliers. We start to mix and match. Those are very similar to the platform games that we could see of the Amazons and the other ones. We see how different retailers are collaborating in trying to strengthen the offer, so to speak, not just being this kind of items, but you can also get this one, not just morning paper, but as well your morning sandwiches, not just your pharmacy items, but also your do-it-yourself tools that you need, and how these kind of things are mixing up together. We still don't see as much fulfillment being done in store. There are certain stores that still do this, trying to get close to the customer and have a close and local relevant assortment, being able to service the customer in the nearby vicinities of the stores. And I think that moving into the future, this is somewhere where we're really moving. I think that we're neither going to see those big one-fit-all kind of efficiencies where we focus everything to one space, nor we're going to see how we provide distribution through the supply chain to be closer to the customer. But we're going to find ourselves somewhere in the middle. And I think this middle ground really challenges us to be competitive where it counts, because we need all those pieces of those applications, those supporting systems, those inputs, those analytics, that automation that can be created to avoid the pits that we so often find ourselves in having very high costs for doing this delivery. We say that the last mile of the delivery often counts for about 40% of the whole cost in the supply chain. How can you sustain a business where the last mile, which used to be done by the customer, is really accounting for 40% of the whole cost? We understand just by looking at the numbers that this needs to be transformed into something else. We have very bad flexibility, we have bad scalabilities, and we've seen that in the days up to Christmas, how many vendors didn't have the time nor the capacity to service the customers and the requirements. We didn't bring in the visibility of the supply chain. We didn't give the control to the customer, being allowed to say, this is when I want my delivery. and having routes being updated accordingly. There's so many pits that we've been falling in over the few days, over the few months here, as we've been really just throwing money and manual resources on this problem, that we haven't really been able to optimize this the way it deserves to be, and not at least to say if we're going to do this in a sustainable way. When we look upon last mile and when we look upon supply chains overall, I think it makes wise to build a picture, to put these puzzles pieces that we're talking about in an image that we can understand, that we can relate to everywhere. And when we engage ourselves in these kind of works, we try to talk about 3 different images that all needs to be part of this puzzle, all of it. It talks about reliability. The reliability is here to say, did we actually deliver on time what the customer was asking for? That's reliability to you. And of course, it has huge impacts on the way that we do inventory and the way that we do our network design. Can we cope with all these? Do we have what the customer is looking for? Equally, it makes sense to talking about responsiveness, and responsiveness is almost the same thing as saying flexibility, because the customer is expecting flexibility. Can I change my order? Can I visualize my order? Can I scale it up and down? Can I add new things to my order? Can I combine these things? And thirdly, and perhaps over the years to come, we'll see being the major driver for customer differentiations, the sustainability part. How do we work with emissions? How do we work with packaging in our business? Not at least, how do we work with work environments for the people, the employees, the people involved in the last mile delivery? We all know the winter times review of some of the 3PL vendors and the work conditions that we have there. And of course, this impact and flavors down on my decisions as a customer. Where do I want to spend my money? What is equal to the values that I have? When Nike is Nike, tomatoes, tomatoes, and paracetamol is paracetamol. I think the piece really connecting all of this, however, the missing piece, and we'll talk about this as we move further into this webinar, is really saying, how do we leverage technology to bring these 3 big images into the same puzzle? How do we make sure that all of these things actually fits to the best for what we are trying to create? Somewhere around there, I hopefully have set the context, Rika, for you to take us further on, talking about how the supply chain is transforming based upon the changes in customer expectations, how we are being challenged to do this in both a very responsive way, a very reliable way, and a very sustainable way. And how can we use technology to make that happen? That's kind of the image that I'm giving over to you, Rickard, and I hope you can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hansa. Again, my name is Rickard Enmark. I'm responsible for the retail and grocery segment at MuleSoft, and today I will take a couple of minutes to discuss how and why connectivity matters and why it's so important to create this perfect supply chain experience. So obviously there are a lot of different pieces that we could discuss, but for the purpose of this presentation and to really set the foundation of that digital layer that Hansa just discussed, it's all about optimizing the processes to create an efficient and sustainable delivery experience, both for our customers and of course also for our internal processes. However, this is not so easy. There are so many dependencies, both on the internal side of things, but also on the external side of things. We know we have order management systems to break up orders into sub-orders for optimal fulfillment. We have warehouse management systems. We have transportation management. We have the 3PL and drop shipment. And there are so many different aspects. So to get a real-time overview of where an order is, it becomes even more complex as soon as we start adding these new and different options to deliver an order. And just if we think about it, picking up an order from a store usually means many different steps. A customer needs to have a great experience, of course, to maybe create that order and fill it online with the items that they want to pick up. We need to have staff within store to be able to go and pick up the different items. And of course, depending on how we should deliver that order, we need to notify the customer, or we need to notify a delivery partner to actually collect and deliver the order. And on top of this, to create an efficiency within the supply chain, we also need to have some kind of knowledge on how to create faster decision, as we become more and more dependent on external parties to make the right decisions. And in average, we see that an order touches at least 7 different systems. But if you take a step back and look at the average enterprise, we know there are over 800 different systems, and only less than a third of these are actually integrated together. And obviously, that creates a much wider challenge when it comes to creating a real-time overview. And if we don't have that order and inventory order view, obviously there is a lot that we're missing out on when it comes to actually shipping on time and making sure that we have the predictability to our stock and inventory levels. We also know that often today there are quite rigid workflows, which means that it makes it a lot more difficult to actually go in and add new delivery options, for example. Should it really be an IT project that takes several months to just add another way of delivering or fulfilling an order? And today, the consumer, especially now with COVID and what's happening going forward, we will see that the consumer are expecting us to be able to deliver much more and a lot quicker. Obviously, all of this makes it very difficult to predict demand and be proactive in the way that we source and clear our inventories. So at the end of the day, we need a real-time operational visibility to manage our business and to be able to cope with the situation that we have. And one of these aspects that we really need to look at is to connect the different systems that we have. We know that we have systems on-premise in our own data centers, but we're also moving towards cloud. And that is the best of breed setup will further increase over time here. So how can we make sure that we have a connected landscape to provide a single source of truth? We also need to look at streamlining our processes, and this can be a real challenge because how much time and money should we invest on reinventing these manual processes, or should we look at platform that can provide agility out of the box? And finally, with the rising demand from the consumer today to get their orders and having a first-class experience, we really need to accelerate development. Again, it should not take several months of an IT project to add a new shipping partner or connect to a 3PL or whatever it may be. And at the end of the day, the way that we look at this is that it all comes down to how you actually work with integrations and APIs. And that's a critical component for us to actually be able to deliver speed and truly become an agile organization with speed in mind. So the way that we at MuleSoft talk about this is that we focus a lot on how we work with our APIs and our integrations. And today, when we look at an application or a product or a service, it's really not about building everything from scratch, from the ground up. It's about taking the best components out there and creating a service based on that. I usually talk about services like Uber or Uber Eats. I mean, Uber is not in the business of creating a map service to track where the order is. They're not in the business of creating a payment service. They're in the business of combining all of these aspects together with the restaurants to create the seamless experience for the customer to get their order in the quickest and fastest way. And all of this is done by connecting different APIs from different services together to gain that speed. Another really important aspect when we talk about APIs and integration and the more digital channels that we open up is security. In retail, I think we've been fairly spared to date, especially in Sweden when it comes to data privacy and cybersecurity threats. However, the more we open up with new channels and new possibilities to serve our customers, the more at risk we will be. And with APIs, we can really create a controlled environment where we have access and control access to data and make sure that we're not exposing ourselves to the risk of computer crime, which is, of course, something that is quite critical these days. And the way that we talk about this is to really look at it as a framework. We have our system of records, and that could be, external. It could be internal systems, and those could be on-premise or they can be in cloud. But how can we make sure that we actually have access to all of this in a secured and fast manner? Well, exposing a small layer of APIs on top of them to make sure they're more seamless and easier to get access to internally. And then the next step of this is to start thinking about, okay, so what's the type of business processes that we need to orchestrate? So combining multiple underlying systems into business process orchestration APIs, which will then be secured, and even better, they can be reusable, because with reusability comes speed. And finally, we have a system of engagement. People or systems or computers will need to gain access to the infrastructure and the data that we have to really break apart these data silos that we're building up unintentionally or intentionally sometimes. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to create reusable assets that can quickly serve new initiatives and really gain the speed that we're looking for. So with this framework, it becomes so much easier and faster to actually be able to roll out new products and services. And that's what we do at MuleSoft. The vision that we have is to connect data, no matter where it is, in cloud or on-premise, internally or externally, to create an application network to really fuel that transformation process. And we do that with APIs and integrations to orchestrate and to really gain that real-time visibility into not only where the order is, but also all the other data that is relevant for us. And with that, I will hand it over to Erik to talk about some examples on how this can actually be achieved.
Okay, thank you, Rickard. Awesome. So Hansa has already outlined the overall situation and suggested some important focus areas. Rickard has taken a little bit of an explanation stab here on what the connectivity piece can do for you in order to solve that. And I would like to share with you a little bit of a concrete example from the real world where we have worked together with both MuleSoft and some of our clients in order to address a particular challenge with regards to last mile delivery. Maybe this example is not exactly from the retail business, but it is an example based on food delivery from quick serve food restaurants. So we have this component of fast last mile delivery. So the time from order to delivery has to be minimal, as you know. And I think Rickard already mentioned Uber Eats, and I think we'll see some of the usual suspects here, even though they're not named explicitly. So to start off with, we have a hungry customer bringing up his smartphone, as you do these days when you're hungry, looking up some of the delivery service providers, browsing their marketplace and menu, placing an order. But what happens then, of course, is that, well, you need to get into the restaurant where the order taker person has been provided with some way of interacting with the delivery service provider. In some cases, usually by using a specific tablet or some other mechanism to feed information about what is the status of this particular restaurant. Is it open? What is the menu like today? Is there a specific inventory shortage or something that needs adjustment? And of course, taking the order and also acknowledging the order within a specific time, because that is in the contract with the delivery service provider in order to actually push the workflow. And going to this restaurant's point of sale and into the fulfillment system, the kitchen gets busy on working on the order, and it gets picked up and delivered to our hungry customer. So this is quite a typical use case when it comes to this delivery service provider providing the last mile delivery for these restaurants. What happens then is that, you know, there is not only one delivery service provider, there are a few of them. So let's add another one, and you get another tablet or some other mechanism to do the exact same thing. And well, there is probably a third of the same kind. So by now, our order taker here is quite a busy person, trying to keep up with all these delivery service providers in order to be active in all these channels. To sell more food. So, but it's worth the effort, they think, but it becomes a little bit cumbersome. We talked about reliability. We talked about eliminating the human factor, you know, in order to be responsive and such things. So let's see how we can solve this thing. And I don't think you will be surprised on, you know, some of the components here. So to solve the puzzle, we still have these delivery service providers. We still have the hungry customers. I mean, that is the good part of the problem. Now we just want to find a good way to keep these customers happy and not so hungry. So what happens, what we can do then, by using the way of thinking that Rickard is talking about, by using APIs and standardized connectivity and manage the business processes in a good way and modeling them properly through APIs and abstracting away specifics around certain systems, like you can consider these delivery service providers like a connected system that you don't want to influence your entire operation, the specifics for each delivery service provider. So by utilizing MuleSoft and connecting to these different providers, we are already ready to add another service provider or delivery service provider. But what happens in the restaurant? What happened to the poor order taker? Well, to begin with, why don't bring in the menu data from our menu or master data management system? Why we don't have to have a person to enter the order into our point of sales that then gets fulfilled in the same manner? So what's still left to be done here is to manage the store status and the overall relationship to the delivery service providers in general. And here is a store associate that can handle only that, which is a much less stressful job than the order taker job. So in one way, we have made our operations much more reliable by eliminating the human factor. We get a higher level of responsiveness. This idea that you need to acknowledge an order within a certain amount of minutes that the order taker used to do, that sort of becomes a little bit funny, because the acknowledgement can be done almost instantaneously through this integration path. So in that way, we are on our way to solving the puzzle. So in this example I've given, it's quite a simple one, but I think it also illustrates the type of change that you can get by doing, addressing quite a small part of the piece. Well, it's actually can grow into more parts as well. But you need to start somewhere. It can be a question of where you start and such. So with this, I hope this example was sort of giving you a little bit of a taste of how it can look when doing this type of change of your operations and last mile delivery integration into your operations, and how you can apply in a retail scenario. With that, I would like to hand the word back to Hansa to wrap things up a little bit.
Thank you, Erik. Thank you for sharing the example with us. And I think it's a great example. It talks about, in this case, truly the last mile and how that is being optimized, and how we create the connectivity between those pieces that organize not just delivery piece, but also the customer experience, which I think is in the end of the day, it's all about how do we service the customer to its liking, and it's a great example. So in the last 5 to 10 minutes of this webinar, really, where do we start? I think the big question to have is really saying where are the ambitions of your business model and your expectation on what this should deliver? I tried to plant the idea of last mile fulfillment and supply chain optimization, by all means, as being a puzzle with many necessary pictures to build the complete image that we're trying to create. I think this image in itself, as we start looking at the expectations, we can see that this picture is really a moving picture. It's a picture that constantly changes, both in colors and in terms of size, what this should be. And I think it starts just there. It starts in trying to understand what from all these pieces that we actually need. Where are we already on our journey? Have we got access to the warehouse? Do we know what inventory we have? Do we have the capability to optimize inventory where it makes the most difference? Is this a central inventory? Are we even moving this into store inventory? How can we make sure that we keep online real-time information on the inventory position in the store to be allowed to fulfill from the store, if that is the picture that we're trying to paint? How do we do this without driving cost for extra distribution, safety stocks inside of our stores, to practicalities in how do we do an optimized picking, whether this is a centralized robotics picking or if this is being done by people inside our stores? How do we work with local distribution? Is this a matter of our own distribution? And if so, how do we optimize this, not just in terms of cost efficiencies and route plannings, but also how do we do this with the least environmental impact that can be created, knowing that the customer preference sits within the sustainability area? The growth of delivery lockers. How do we work with lockers? How do we make sure that we enable those capabilities we have in the best way? How do we make sure that we have the right amount of lockers? How can we give customers the right access to these lockers? And how can we handle changes to expectations on what's going on in these lockers? Of course, it also comes down to how do we do our business planning? How can we create reliable forecasts in what we do? How can we bring those forecasts to life in the way that we plan for our routes, in the way that we contract delivers, in the way that we plan the resources that we need? And at the end of the day, of course, customers and customer orders. How do we handle orders? How do we make sure that customers feel empowered to actually, as I said, get to the final stretch on the whole experience of commerce? The results in actually getting things into your hands, into your mouth, into wherever you want to have it. The fulfillment piece of the whole sales experience. We've been trying to, during this webinar, position integration as one of those core pieces that actually completes this puzzle. And I think that in any case, if we are looking into the hoods of the engines that we have in our vehicles for this journey, we can see that we have the absolute majority of all the capabilities that we need. But we don't have the capabilities to extract and deconstruct, I would say rather, the existing structures, and to start combine these into the flow, the process flow, the customer journey that we're trying to complete. Integrations is the key, is the way that we unlock these kind of capabilities. And we can see from good experience that the way that MuleSoft is addressing this question really speaks to the flexibility that the customer and businesses are looking. But first of all, perhaps everything starts with understanding what kind of picture, what kind of image that I'm trying to lay. And we're happy to support you, gentlemen and ladies in the call with just these kind of services. To assess where we are, to assess where you want to be, to find the shortcomings, to find the opportunities, to benchmark, and to say, this is the journey that lies ahead of you. And then we can bring the technology around that will actually help us to put this puzzle into pieces. So I think in the final words on this webinar before we open up to Q&A, reiterating the statements that we heard during this morning, last mile is and will continue to be the key differentiator to the retailers. The consequence of commerce is fulfillment. I talked about Nike being Nike. Unless we differentiate ourselves in the offering and being unique there, customers going to go for convenience, going to go for control, going to go for sustainability. And if we want to be part of that order, these are the things that we need to address. I think as what we call the Uber approach to connecting capabilities is about mode. It's really the only way going forward. We can't build new monolithic solutions to do things. Things needs to start working in service, where different pieces of the processes can be tailored into one new left to right process that the customer is looking to achieve. And of course, the idea of getting there is really to understand what kind of picture that you're looking to create. And here we need to start thinking about where we are, where do we want to be, what's the kind of necessary flexibility that we need in this puzzle that we're trying to move. I talked about those different scenarios, A, B, C, D, E, F. There's just the top of the iceberg. And we will see a tremendous amount of new innovative way of actually getting the customer closer to the control seat in driving just the customer experience that the customer is looking for. Somewhere here, and there's just the final few minutes. Let's see if we'll end the formal piece here and see what kind of questions, if any, that has come into this one. Of course, we will share the materials. Every one of you who has been enrolled to the webinar, it will be sent out with a thank you for attending. Has there been any questions, Erik?
Yeah, we have to be really quick now, I think. But yes, let's take a look here. And oh, yep. So, what is the most challenging piece that I need to take care of in my last mile engagements? Yeah, I think that's a big question, but maybe you can give a very short 30-second stab at it, Hans.
The 30-second question is, of course, is trying to understand where cost is being generated. Where do we create cost in this case? There is no one, there's no retailer, there's no logistics partner out there that can't deliver whatever we're looking for to any cost associated to it. The idea that we need to start thinking about saying, where do we generate the cost? And how can we turn that cost into its smallest possible entity without losing service levels, without losing the experience that the customer is looking for. So cost, of course, is the key game. I think up to now, retailers we've been in this game not to lose market shares. We haven't been concerned about doing things optimized because the market has just been growing. We're going to find ourselves in a period right now where the market contracts slightly and levels off for a period of time, and we need to get back to that situation where we actually can start optimizing things, looking for the cost. That's the first place to be.
Yes, optimization, streamlining your operations and understanding where things are and doing that in the most efficient way. That sounds like a plan, Hansa. Let's do that. So I think with that, we are wrapping up. Thank you so much for listening to us today. Thank you, Hansa, for giving your perspectives, and also thank you, Rickard, for introducing the MuleSoft way of doing it. And I'll hand over to Anna to make the very last wrap up here.
Absolutely, you just made it for me actually. So as Hans already mentioned, we will be sharing a thank you note with the replay of this webinar. It will also be available on our websites later on. So yeah, keep an eye on that. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the week. And goodbye. Thank you for joining again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.